One night, Jesus was eating a special dinner with his close friends and followers, the disciples. As they began to eat, Jesus predicted one of them was about to betray him. Listen to what the Bible says. And when they had taken their places and were eating, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They began to be distressed and to say to him one after another, "Surely not I." He said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the bowl with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed." Then they began to ask one another which one of them could be the one to do this. That same night, after dinner, Jesus took a few of his disciples into a garden. Jesus wanted to go there as a quiet place he could pray to God, his Father. On the way to the garden, Jesus said, "Tonight you will all become deserters. For it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered.' But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Of course, after he said this, his disciples assured Jesus they would never desert him. While they were in the garden, Jesus and his disciples heard footsteps coming. The footsteps grew louder and louder, the sound of marching growing closer and closer. Suddenly, a crowd carrying swords and clubs came into the garden. They grabbed Jesus and arrested him. Listen to what Jesus said. "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all of this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. After Jesus was arrested, he was brought to the house of the chief priests. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man, seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He had blasphemy. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and they struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?" When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. The governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. The thorns dug into Jesus' head and made him bleed. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. When the soldiers got tired of mocking Jesus, they led him off to be crucified. Crucifixion was a terrible way to die. It meant being hung on a wooden cross in terrible pain until you could no longer breathe. Crucifixion was the method of execution reserved usually for criminals. They led Jesus up to a lonely hillside called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. That is where they crucified him. That is where they nailed Jesus to a cross and left him to die. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then about noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly this man was innocent." And when all the crowds who had gathered there for this spectacle saw what had taken place, they returned home, beating their breasts. But all his acquaintances, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things.
all.